Chapter 5, Elwood's Evening and Joseph's. Chapter 5, Elwood's Evening and Joseph's. For half a mile, Elwood Withers followed the carriage containing Anna Warriner and her friend. Then, at the curve of the valley, their roads parted, and Lucy and he were alone. The soft light of the delicious summer evening was around them. The air, cooled by the stream which broadened and bickered beside their way, was full of all healthy meadow odors, and every farm in the branching dells they passed was a picture of tranquil happiness. Yet Lucy had sighed before she was aware of it, a very faint, tremulous breath, but it reached Elwood's sensitive ear. "You don't seem quite well, Lucy," he said. "Because I have talked so little?" she asked. "Not just that, but I was almost afraid my coming for you was not welcome. I don't mean—" But here he grew confused and did not finish the sentence. "Indeed, it was very kind of you," said she. This was not an answer to his remark, and both felt that it was not. Elwood struck the horse with his whip, then as suddenly drew the reins on the startled animal. "Pshaw!" he exclaimed in a tone that was almost fierce. "What's the use of my beating about the bush in this way?" Lucy caught her breath and clenched her hands under her shawl for one instant. Then she became calm and waited for him to say more. "Lucy," he continued, turning towards her, "you have a right to think me a fool. I can talk to anybody else more freely than to you, and the reason is I want to say more to you than to any other woman. There's no use in my being a coward any longer. It's a desperate venture I'm making, but it must be made. Have you never guessed how I feel towards you?" "Yes," she answered very quietly. "Well, what do you say to it?" He tried to speak calmly, but his breath came thick and hard, and the words sounded hoarsely. "I will say this, Elwood," said she, "that because I saw your heart, I have watched your ways and studied your character. I find you honest and manly in everything, and so tender and faithful that I wish I could return your affection in the same measure." A gleam as of lightning passed over his face. "Oh, don't misunderstand me," she cried, her calmness forsaking her. "I esteem, I honor you, and that makes it harder for me to seem ungrateful, unfeeling, as I must. Elwood, if I could, I would answer you as you wish, but I cannot." "If I wait," he whispered, "and lose your best years in a vain hope? No, Elwood, my friend, let me always call you so. I have been cowardly also. I knew an explanation must come, and I shrank from the pain I should feel in giving you pain. It is hard, and better for both of us that it should not be repeated." "There's something wrong in this world," he exclaimed after a long pause. "I suppose you could no more force yourself to love me than I could force myself to love Anna Warriner, or that Miss Blessing. Then what put it into my heart to love you? Was it God or the devil? Elwood, how can I help myself? Can I help drawing my breath? Did I set about it of my own will? Here I see a life that belongs to my own life, as much a part of it as my head or heart, but I can't reach it. It draws away from me, and maybe joins itself to someone else forever. Oh my God!" Lucy burst into such a violent passion of weeping that Elwood forgot himself in his trouble for her. He had never witnessed such grief, as it seemed to him, and his honest heart was filled with self-reproach at having caused it. "Forgive me, Lucy," he said very tenderly, encircling her with his arm and drawing her head upon his shoulder. "I spoke rashly and wickedly in my disappointment. I thought only of myself and forgot that I might hurt you by my words. I'm not the only man who has this kind of trouble to bear, and perhaps if I could see clearer, but I don't know. I can only see one thing." She grew calmer as he spoke. Lifting her head from his shoulder, she took his hand and said, "You are a true and a noble man, Elwood. It is only a grief to me that I cannot love you as a wife should love her husband, but my will is as powerless as yours." "I believe you, Lucy," he answered sadly. "It's not your fault, but then it isn't mine either. You make me feel that the same rule fits both of us. Leastways, so far as helping the matter is concerned. You needn't tell me I may find another woman to love. The very thought of it makes me sick at heart. I'm rougher than you are, and awkward in my ways." "It is not that. Oh, believe me, it is not that," cried Lucy, interrupting him. "Have you ever sought for reasons to account for your feeling toward me? Is it not something that does not seem to depend upon what I am, upon any qualities that distinguish me from other women?" "How do you know so much?" Elwood asked. "Have you—" He commenced, but did not finish the question. He leaned silently forward, urged on the horse, and Lucy could see that his face was very stern. "They say," she began, on finding that he was not inclined to speak, "they say that women have a natural instinct which helps them to understand many things, and I think it must be true. Why can you not spare me the demand for reasons which I have not? If I were to take time and consider it and try to explain, it would be of no help to you. It would not change the fact. I suppose a man feels humiliated when this trouble comes upon him. He shows his heart, and there seems to be a claim upon the woman of his choice to show hers in return. The sense of injustice is worse than humiliation, Elwood, though I cannot do otherwise. I shall always have the feeling that I have wronged you." "Oh, Lucy," he murmured, in a very sad but not reproachful voice, "every word you say, in showing me that I must give you up, only makes it more impossible to me. And it is just impossible. That's the end of the matter. I know how people talk about trials being sent us for our good, and it's being the will of God, and all that. It's a trial, that's true. Whether it's for my good or not, I shall learn after a while, but I can find out God's will only by trying the strength of my own. Don't be afeard, Lucy. I've no notion of saying or doing anything from this time on to disturb you, but here you are, striking his breast with his clenched hand, and here you will be when the day comes, as I feel that it must and shall come, to bring us together." She could see the glow of his face in the gathering dusk as he turned towards her and offered his hand. How could she help taking it? If some pulse in her own betrayed the thrill of admiring recognition of the man's powerful and tender nature, which suddenly warmed her oppressed blood, she did not fear that he would draw courage from the token. She wished to speak, but found no words which, coming after his, would not have seemed either cold and unsympathetic, or too near the verge of the hope which she would gladly have crushed. Elwood was silent for a while, and hardly appeared to be awaiting an answer. Meanwhile, the road left the valley, climbing the shoulders of its enclosing hills, where the moist meadow fragrance was left behind, and dry, warm breezes, filled with the peculiar smell of the wheat fields, blew over them. It was but a mile farther to the corner, near which Lucy's parents resided. "How came you three to go to Joseph's place this afternoon?" he asked. "Wasn't it a dodge of Miss Blessing's?" She proposed it, partly in play, I think, and when she afterwards insisted on our going, there seemed to be no good reason for refusing. "Oh, of course not," said Elwood. "But tell me now, honestly, Lucy, what do you make out of her?" Lucy hesitated a moment. "She is a little willful in her ways, perhaps, but we mustn't judge too hastily. We have known her such a short time. Her manner is very amiable." "I don't know about that," Elwood remarked. "It reminds me of one of her dresses, so ruffled and puckered and stuck over, with ribbons and things that you can't rightly tell what the stuff is. I'd like to be sure whether she has an eye to Joseph." "To him," Lucy exclaimed. "Him first and foremost. He's as innocent as a year-old baby. There isn't a better fellow living than Joseph Asten, but his bringing up has been fitter for a girl than a boy. He hasn't had his eye teeth cut yet, and it's my opinion that she has—" "What do you mean by that?" "No harm. Used to the world as much as anything else. He don't know how to take people. He thinks the outside color runs down to the core. So it does with him. But I can't see what that girl is under her pleasant ways, and he won't guess that there's anything else of her. Between ourselves, Lucy, you don't like her. I saw that when you came away, though you were kissing each other at the time." "What a hypocrite I must be!" cried Lucy, rather fiercely. "Not a bit of it. Women kiss as men shake hands. You don't go around saying 'Julia, dear,' like Anna Warrener." Lucy could not help laughing. "There," she said, "that's enough, Elwood. I'd rather you would think yourself in the right than to say anything more about her this evening." She sighed wearily, not attempting to conceal her fatigue and depression. "Well, well," he replied, "I'll pester you no more with disagreeable subjects. There's the house now, and you'll soon be rid of me. I won't tell you, Lucy, that if you ever want for friendly service, you must look to me, because I'm afeard you won't feel free to do it, but you'll take all I can find to do without your asking." Without waiting for an answer, he drew up his horse at the gate of her home, handed her out, said good night, and drove away. Such a singular restlessness took possession of Joseph after the departure of his guests that the evening quiet of the farm became intolerable. He saddled his horse and set out for the village, readily inventing an errand which explained the ride to himself as well as to his aunt. The regular movements of the animal did not banish the unquiet motions of his mind, but it relieved him by giving them a wider sweep and a more definite form. The man who walks is subject to the power of his antius of a body, moving forwards only by means of the weight which holds it to the earth. There is a clog upon all his thoughts, an ever-present sense of restriction and impotence, but when he is lifted above the soil, with the air under his foot soles, swiftly moving without effort, his mind, a poising Mercury, mounts on winged heels. He feels the liberation of new and nimble powers. Wider horizons stretch around his inward vision. Obstacles are measured or overlooked. The brute strength under him charges his whole nature with a more vigorous electricity. The fresh, warm, healthy vital force which filled Joseph's body to the last embranchment of every nerve and vein, the hum of those multitudinous spirits of life, which, while building their glorious abode, march as if in triumphant procession through its secret passages, and summon all the fairest phantoms of sense to their completed chambers, constituted far more than he suspected an element of his disturbance. This was the strong pinion on which his mind and soul hung balanced, above the close atmosphere which he seemed to ride away from as he rode. The great joy of human life filled and thrilled him. All possibilities of action and pleasure and emotion swam before his sight. All he had read or heard of individual careers in all ages, climates, and conditions of the race, dazzling pictures of the myriad-sided earth, to be won by whosoever dared arbitrarily to seize the freedom waiting for his grasp, floated through his brain. Hitherto a conscience not born of his own nature, a very fair and saintly-visaged jailer of thought, but a jailer none the less, had kept strict guard over every outward movement of his mind, gently touching hope and desire and conjecture when they reached a certain line, and saying, "No, no farther, it is prohibited." But now, with one strong involuntary throb, he found himself beyond the line, with all the ranges ever trodden by man stretching forward to a limitless horizon. He rose in his stirrups, threw out his arms, lifted his face towards the sky, and cried, "God, I see what I am!" It was only a glimpse, like that of a landscape struck in golden fire by lightning from the darkness. "What is it," he mused, "that stands between me and this vision of life? Who built a wall of imaginary law around these needs, which are in themselves inexorable laws? The world, the flesh, and the devil," they say in warning. "Bright, boundless world, my home, my playground, my battlefield, my kingdom to be conquered, and this body they tell me to despise, this perishing house of clay, which is so intimately myself that its comfort and delight cheer me to the inmost soul. It is a dwelling fit for an angel to inhabit. Shall not its hungering senses all be fed? Who shall decide for me, if not myself, on their claims? Who can judge for me what strength requires to be exercised, what pleasure to be enjoyed, what growth to be forwarded? All around me, everywhere, are the means of gratification. I have but to reach forth my hand and grasp, but a narrow cell built ages ago encloses me wherever I go. Such was the vague substance of his thoughts. It was the old struggle between life, primitive, untamed life, as the first man may have felt it, and its many masters, assertion and resistance, all the more fierce because so many influences laid their hands upon its forces. As he came back to his usual self, refreshed by this temporary escape, Joseph wondered whether other men shared the same longing and impatience, and this turned his musings into another channel. Why do men so carefully conceal what is deepest and strongest in their natures? Why is so little of spiritual struggle and experience ever imparted? The convert publicly admits his sinful experience and tries to explain the entrance of grace into his regenerated nature. The reformed drunkard seems to take a positive delight in making his former condition degraded and loathsome. But the opening of the individual life to the knowledge of power and passion and all the possibilities of the world is kept more secret than sin. Love is hidden as if it were a reproach. Friendship watched, lest it express its warmth too frankly. Joy and grief and doubt and anxiety repressed as much as possible. A great lid is shut down upon the human race. They must painfully stoop and creep instead of standing erect with only God's heaven over their heads. I am lonely, but I know not how to cry for companionship. My words would not be understood, or if they were, would not be answered. Only one gate is free to me, that leading to the love of woman. There, at least, must be such an intense, intimate sympathy as shall make the reciprocal revelation of the lives possible. Full of this single certainty, which, the more he pondered upon it, seemed to be his nearest chance of help, Joseph rode slowly homewards. Rachel Miller, who had impatiently awaited his coming, remarked the abstraction of his face, and attributed it to a very different cause. She was thereby wonderfully strengthened to make her communication in regard to the evening company. Nevertheless, the subject was so slowly approached and so ambiguously alluded to that Joseph could not immediately understand it. "That is something. That is a step," he said to himself. Then turning towards her with a genuine satisfaction in his face, added, "Aunt, do you know that I have never really felt until now that I am the owner of this property? It will be more of a home to me after I have received the neighborhood as my guests. It has always controlled me, but now it must serve me." He laughed in great good humor, and Rachel Miller, in her heart, thanked Miss Julia Blessing.